Hey, Clemson family, welcome to the football offseason. We'll talk about some roster changes in progress, and we'll recap that mess in Miami.
I'm Daniel Shirley. It was a mess. Before we can look to 2023, we have to break down that game, and we'll talk some basketball as well.
Basketball's the bright spot. That's interesting. I'm Bill Zimmerman. Welcome to episode 54 of the Reign Supreme All-Way podcast. We're glad to be one of your sources for analysis of the Tigers in 2023. Happy New Year. It's our first episode of the year. Appreciate thousands of you have been checking us out on youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff, as well as the major podcast apps. Well, let's jump into football. Some breaking news today. KJ Henry, defensive end, who had a really good couple of years in 2021 and 2022, has announced he's leaving. Bryan Bresee, the day earlier at defensive tackle, also announcing he is leaving. You have to be happy for them. I also expect we'll have some similar decisions coming forward in the next several days.
Probably. I would think if you said which way would you bet on those things, you would lean towards guys are going to the league. But I think you have to look at the careers of these two players, and they've meant a lot to this program. Bryan Bresee, obviously a tough year this year for him, but he was a good player for these past 3 years. And then KJ Henry, I think, to me, is the perfect example of a developmental player for Clemson. I know he was a 5-star player when he came in as far as a recruit, but he didn't do a whole lot his first couple of years. But then you saw him transform into a really good player. He was a leader for the defense. He was probably a leader for the whole team. And then he's got a chance to be a good pro, a solid pro. And we'll see where they're drafted coming up this spring.
Looking ahead to the next crop of talent, there are a few early enrollees who are looking very good at two of the big all-star games for high school seniors. Some big headlines and highlights coming out for Peter Woods and Noble Johnson, defensive lineman and wide receiver respectively, who were both in the Under Armour game. And then as practice takes place for this weekend's All-American game, Tomarrion Parker is really showing out on the defensive line. He's an end. That's a position to need for Clemson.
Oh, it certainly is. I mean, with Miles Murphy leaving and the two guys we've talked about already, and then some other decisions to come, these guys really need to step up and be ready to play. And this is an important class, I feel like, overall. And you mentioned Woods and Parker, Noble Johnson. Those are all three at positions that Clemson needs this group to contribute, and I think contribute right away. Remember, we had Jeremy Johnson on a few weeks ago, and he talked about Peter Woods being a day one contributor, and I think that's going to be important for this team. Noble Johnson probably needs to be ready to play as well, and some of these other defensive linemen that we've seen, including some who are already with the team. So, yeah, this is an important group, I feel like, in a really important offseason for this program moving forward.
Check out our homepage, clemsonkickoff.com. I guess I have to put that Orange Bowl score up there at some point. You can also check out all our previous episodes right there. Let's get into that Orange Bowl. Clemson just overall very much the less physical team. That rarely goes well if you get into a deficit early. You know, if Desmond Howard wanted to resurrect his old quote of Clemson being a finesse team, I would have a hard time arguing it in this case. He was wrong back when he said it at the time. This was not the Clemson team that marched onto the field in Phoenix early 2016 and matched up pound for pound with Alabama and was very effective. This was a very different look for the Tigers.
It wasn't a good look either. I think this really leaves a bad taste in your mouth for the 2022 season. I know they won the ACC title, and that's great. It's always nice to win a conference title. But if you look back through this season, and they lose to Notre Dame in really poor fashion. They lose to South Carolina. Anytime you lose to South Carolina, that stinks. And then you lose the way you lost on Friday night. I have a hard time seeing that as a quote-unquote great season. It's a good season. 11-3 is better than 10-3. A conference title is better than no conference title. But I still feel like this was not up to Clemson's standard. We kept hearing, best is the standard, and it feels like this program has taken a step back. And I think Friday night was a big example of that. They got pushed around on both sides of the ball, and that hasn't happened a lot the last decade, but it certainly happened Friday night.
Yeah, you and I have been going back and forth about that best as a standard line, and I've seen it on some message boards too, not just our texts between each other. Best as a standard really applies to here's what we're going for. And you're not always going to achieve everything you want to achieve. I get it. You're not always going to be able to, win every game. There's only one champion every year. And having been through far worse ruts than this, far deeper difficulties as a program, I'm not going to sit here and just get sour because Clemson can't go 15-0 every year. But boy, they just did not look anywhere near what they need to be. They didn't look as bad as they did against Notre Dame. There were plenty of yards that they put up. They moved the ball, they moved the chains. The offense did plenty of things well. Couldn't put points on the board. Couldn't convert once they got in the red zone. Played around with a fake field goal. The first time they did get in the red zone, you don't know what's driving that. Does that suddenly take BT Potter out of his rhythm? Did they call the fake because BT had some kind of nagging injury that, Sweeney's not going to discuss those things? Or was it just a case of getting aggressive and not really instituting the kind of mentality that you want on offense? You mentioned at one point to me, if you're going to go for it, go for it. Don't mess around with a fake, giving the personnel that's back there.
Yeah, look, I get it. Tennessee's got a high-scoring offense, one of the best offenses in the country, even without Hendon Hooker. I mean, I think you saw how talented Joe Milton is throwing the ball. You also saw how inaccurate he is at times, over or on slants or in timing and those kinds of things. But there were chances there, and I didn't understand the fake field goal. If you want to go for it, go for it. I'm all for that, but don't run a fake field goal with your kicker and your holder. It just made no sense at that point in the game. And it felt like it set a bad tone to me for the game. And I know it's early, it's the first drive for your offense, all that stuff, and there's plenty of time to get back in the game. And they did. They scored a touchdown. They're down 7, and then the defense falls apart, with a mistake in the secondary. So, look, I'm not a crazy person. I've seen a lot of bad football for this program through the years. This is not the Ken Hatfield years. It's not the Tommy Bowden years. I understand that. But there has to be some acknowledgement that it has taken a little bit of a step back. And Friday night was just a bad example of that. It's one game. I get that. But it's also not just one game. It's 2 years of struggles relative to what had been done before. A lot of teams would like to go 21-6 in 2 years. But if you're going to compete at the highest level, they've got to be better than they were Friday night. I thought the game plan was weird on offense. I thought there were some really questionable decisions on offense and on defense as far as the coaching staff. And those things have to get straightened out. And is it the play call? Is it the player? We don't know, Bill. We're not there. We're not in the huddle. We're not on the sideline. Maybe they had the perfect play call and somebody screwed it up, right? But there's something that's just not right with the team the last couple of years, that if they want to get back to that level that they were at, they've got to get some things straightened out.
Yep, a lot of different personnel, both on the coaching staff and on the field. That's only going to change even more going into next year. Can it be an improvement? Quite possibly. I mean, is it a downward trend? Well, it's 2 bad seasons. What's the disclaimer I used to say when I was working in marketing? Current performance is no guarantee of future performance. There's no guarantee that Clemson will keep getting worse and worse. People who are sitting there and saying, oh, it's the demise of the program. No, take a hike with that. But there are problems that have to be solved. And you talk about problem solving, let's talk about the defense a little bit, because one of the things that I really liked about Wes Goodwin this year was his ability to adjust at halftime, make sure that if a team had been moving ball in the first half, they had to find a way to do it differently in the second half. And that did not seem to happen in the least in Miami against Tennessee.
No, it didn't. And look, they were banged up in the secondary. We know that. They were shorthanded at cornerback. That's obviously the case. Well, then let's don't leave those young corners on an island, right? And we saw that when they pull within 7 and then they leave one of their young guys out there by himself and give up the long play. I thought that was a huge mistake at that point in the game, where it felt like they had scratched and clawed and got back into the game, and then they just make a mistake there defensively. Is it the scheme? Is it the player? Did the safety not get over there where he was supposed to be? We don't know. I don't know. But something, was a problem there, and Tennessee took advantage of it. I mean, Bill, look, if you look at the stats, and stats don't tell you everything in a game, Clemson outgained Tennessee by more than 100 yards. They had 34 first downs, and Tennessee had 20. Time of possession. I mean, if you look at all these stats, you'd say, wow, Clemson won this game pretty handily. But they didn't get the job done on defense in key spots. And then they didn't get the job done on offense when they had a chance to put points on the board. You know, that I think they got cute at the end of the first half where they tried to run one extra play, and Cade Klubnik, a true freshman, lost track of the time, and so they get no points out of that. I thought that hurt. The fake field goal we talked about, I thought that hurt. And you know, they go for fourth and short, and I felt like had the wrong back in the game. If you're going to go power there, give the ball to Phil Maffa. And I think we can agree they're not using Phil Maffa the right way. They're not using him enough. Not that they should take away carries from Will Shipley, because he's a great player, but I'd love to see them split the carries more evenly. And those things have to get figured out. And is it just this season or the last 2 seasons, and maybe they get things turned around? Hopefully that's the case.
We will see. Maffa definitely developed this year into the back that I've been hoping he would be, and the back that you forecast he could be when he was coming out of high school. I would like to see a lot more of him out there. I think the coaches need to take advantage of the fact that this isn't Travis Etienne and some, clear-cut backups. This isn't Wayne Gallman and guys who aren't close to his ability level, his effectiveness. Like, Shipley and Maffa are nearly the same in talent. You want to see them stay fresh. You want to see them bring different styles, keep the opposing defenses maybe a little on their heels. And that's just not happening. Shipley is viewed as a leader, and I get that. But whatever happened to game recognizes game when that was the phrase that led to Trevor Lawrence replacing Kelly Bryant? Well, you don't have to replace Will Shipley with Phil Maffa. You can run them in tandem with one another. And I hope we'll see a lot more of that next year in 2023 and see both of them do really well on draft boards as well. As for Klubnik, a learning experience, it's got to happen. They weren't able to or didn't want to put him into games much more during the year. When he did get in, his results were mixed until that ACC championship game against North Carolina. One thing you talked about with me as well was, does he really need to be central to so many plays? Can't you spread the burden around a little bit and kind of help him stay a little more level?
He threw 54 passes and he ran the ball 20 times. He accounted for 74 plays in his first start as a true freshman against a pretty good defense, especially a pretty good defensive front and good linebacker core. So I felt like they put too much on his shoulders in this game. He's a talented kid. I get that. He's going to be a great player. I really believe that. I think it was the right move to go to him in the ACC championship game and to start him in this game. But I think you have to have a little bit more conservative game plan than to just throw so much on him in his first start.
A couple other freshmen, so to speak, factored into this season pretty importantly. A true freshman defensive coordinator in Goodwin, a freshman Power 5 offensive coordinator in Streeter. He had been an offensive coordinator at Richmond previously. Not good games for either of them against Tennessee. I'll start with Goodwin, who just didn't seem to have an answer for the fact that Tennessee was going to run tempo, have a lot of quick release throws, avoid the blitz, avoid the pressure that Clemson is able to generate for the most part, and at least be kind of bend, don't break. He allowed the top to be taken off. I'm a big fan of Tomarrion Pride. Big plays are going to happen regardless, no matter how talented someone is. That's just how college football is. It's rough on the corners, and especially when they're not going at Nate Wiggins on those deep shots. They're going after Pride. They're going after Lucas. They're going after the other guys. And without Sheridan Jones on the field, it was a little tougher to kind of mix things up and give different looks. Andrew Makuba also kind of playing some man coverage quite a bit in that game and struggling with it as well. He's supposed to be a safety. I mean, he's a heck of a player when he's a starting safety. So you feel for him as well. And I don't think that game is an indictment on any of the talent on the field, but they've got to be better prepared as a unit, and that starts with the coaching.
100% agree. I look, I know Joe Milton, he was 19 to 28. That's not great defensively, but there were other plays where he had guys open and just missed them. I know of at least 3 off the top of my head from that game, and those would have been first downs probably. it just felt like the coaching staff missed on this game plan. Whatever it was, why it was, they just missed. And that's okay. Coaches have bad games too, but if you're going to get back to that elite level, this coaching staff has a lot it has to clean up. And yes, it was a different coaching staff this year. And, it's hard to replace what Tony Elliott meant to this program. It's hard to replace what Brent Venables meant to this program. And these are guys stepping into those roles. I get that. We're not calling for anybody's job. I know a lot of people are doing that. You see it on all the message boards and Twitter. I'm not doing that, but there's got to be better game plans. There's got to be some growth within that coaching staff. Hopefully we'll see that going forward because I think this was a good year. It was not a great year. It was not an elite year. And hopefully this coaching staff will continue to grow with this talent, and we'll see if they can. It's this, like I said, this is a big offseason for this program. Do you want to? Is it going to be great, or is it just going to be pretty good? And I think this year was pretty good, and we'll see next year. And then in 2024, pretty good probably gets you into the playoff every year. But is that the program you want to be, or do you want to be the team that could try to add, another national title at some point? So that, I think this is a big offseason to see where this program heads this next 5 or 6 years.
And we will keep you posted all off season long. We will analyze position by position what the Clemson Tigers were like in 2022 and how they're going to look in 2023 as well. We'll have plenty of content around the spring game. We'll try to start getting some guests back in here more often as well. And by the way, follow us on social media too, Clemson Kickoff on Twitter and on Instagram, trying to share updates there as often as we can in between episodes. Let's get into basketball. No, Clemson's not a basketball school, but they are looking pretty good so far. The men's team 3-0 in ACC play. There's going to be a late game tonight as we record this at Virginia Tech. The latest win coming the same day as that Orange Bowl trouble, winning over NC State, and now a couple of road games in conference play.
Yeah, you kind of wish you could have flipped the results there, right? Maybe the basketball team loses the day the football team wins. And I'm joking. I'm joking. But I didn't expect the basketball team to win that day and the football team to lose. I did. I would have bet money that it would have been the opposite. But this basketball team has responded, I think. They had that terrible loss to Loyola Chicago. They had a bad loss to South Carolina. The other loss is to Iowa. Iowa was really good. So I don't think that's a bad loss at all. But they've responded to that, and 3-0 in the ACC is pretty darn good for this program. So we'll see, where we go next. This Virginia Tech game on Wednesday night, the Pitt game, Pittsburgh, my goodness, all of a sudden looks like a really talented team. That game will be on Saturday. So this is a big week for this basketball team with 2 games on the road. Hopefully they can get a win or 2 and continue to play well in through the early part of the conference season.
Saw some good words about Clemson's play in the front court, and that may seem to indicate to me that PJ Hall is getting to full strength and also getting in sync with the guys around him, and that Coach Brad Brownell is getting a feel for how to set up schemes on this team.
It feels like PJ's kind of finding his way a little bit, from the injury, but Hunter Tyson has stepped up. Chase Hunter has stepped up. But this is a team that's still kind of finding its way a little bit, and that's okay. Undefeated in the ACC through 3 games with these 2 big games coming up, and then we'll see where it can go. But I like the growth that I've seen from this team, especially from that Loyola loss, because that was a bad loss. They played terribly in that game. Again, it's never good to lose to South Carolina either, but they have responded to that. And if PJ can get healthy and start rolling the way Hunter Tyson has played, he was the ACC Player of the Week this week. If they can get those 2 guys and Chase Hunter to kind of lead the way, maybe there's a chance for this team to be pretty good throughout the season.
And the women's team with a landmark win recently and another fairly big game coming up later this week.
Yeah, they are a big win for Amanda Butler's team over Virginia Tech last week to get that first top 10 win in a long time. And that was an impressive game. I got to see most of that game. I was doing a little bit of work, but I watched most of that game. and then a nice win over Wake Forest on Sunday. As Coach Butler pointed out in kind of a post game post on social media, they don't judge you by how much you won by, right? They won by 1. She said it still counts as a W, and that's where they are right now. So they're in a good spot right now, Bill, and they've got Florida State coming up Thursday night. But to see how they've responded from where they were last year is really impressive. They're 11-4 right now. They're 2-1 in the ACC. This is a really good start for this program, and maybe they have a tournament shot in their future if they can keep playing the way they're playing right now.
Amari Robinson and Ruby Whitehorn, the leading scorers on that team. We'll see if the Tigers can keep taking a turn for the better as the season continues. We're not that far away from baseball starting to hit the field a little bit, softball as well, and more player updates expected on the football team as well. We'll bring you analysis of the most important aspects of it all. Well, until our next episode, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Go Tigers.